Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study, and we're going to continue tying up some of these loose ends in the chronology of the kings of Judah from Josiah to Zedekiah. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful, Lord, for the time that we have once again to open your word, and we pray for one another. We ask, Lord, that you can help us to understand these things, to continue to study and learn, and that your character may be seen in us, and that we can understand how to deal with others, how to share these things. And so we ask for your Holy Spirit now to work upon our hearts and minds, to give us clear discernment, to reveal to us our need of you, and to give us strength and power to follow and serve you. So be with us now, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so all of these dates and numbers and spans and times that we find in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, 2 Kings, sorting through them, obviously it's a tapestry of dates, all of these different threads. And so going over it the last few days, I'm hoping that people are seeing at least how we should be studying, because that's the main thing that we learn from everything we do as far as the studying part, right? Obviously, we learn lots about the Bible and Bible prophecy, and we come to understand how man often interprets the scriptures in ways that are counterproductive. We'll say it that way. That is, they blind us to things, or we're blind to things and we can't see things because we don't open our eyes. All these different metaphors we could use. Now, trying to figure out where to go, I think first, I'm going to look at the chart that we have here. So I've been working on this a little bit. So maybe just going over what we have done so far on this chart. Now, we have what's called the Neo-Babylonian Empire. That is, Babylon, was an independent nation from Assyria, but at times Assyria dominated Babylon. So sometimes there's brief times when Babylon is subject to the Assyrian Empire, and there's other times when, as in the Neo-Babylonian Empire, where it ends up conquering Assyria. Right, so it ends up taking over that area. And that's going to be under Nabopolassar. So Nabopolassar is this powerful king of Babylon. And during his reign, Assyria is going to fall. Now, Assyria, they don't fall necessarily just because of Babylon. There's lots of internal things that go on within Assyria that cause its ultimate fall, and also of other nations around them. So Assyria has had these wars with Egypt, battling over the Levant, or as the Babylonians call it, the Hatti land. So we can see here on this chart, we got Nabopolassar. His reign is in that sort of bluish gray, and it's going to go from 625 and all the way to 605. Or pardon me, to 605 when he dies. Yeah, there. And he's going to die on August 15th, 605, which is kind of interesting date. And then so Nebuchadnezzar then becomes the king of Babylon. Now we also see this other king. This is an Egyptian pharaoh, Pharaoh Necho II, and he's going to begin his reign in 610. And he is that one who is the pharaoh that is going to join in this fight. So that is, Babylon is fighting against it, and different people have different opinions about it. So it gets a bit confusing, but it seems that Assyria and, let me see, how does it go? Who's fighting who? So you have Egypt, and Egypt is seeking to control the Levant. And let me see, I got to get this right, because I know I had it wrong, and I probably will get it wrong again. So let me see if I can figure this out. If somebody remembers, you can just tell us how that went. So we got this battle at Carchemish in 609. Okay, Pharaoh Necho led the Egyptian army to the Levant to support the remnants of the Neo-Assyrian Empire against the rising Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, so I had it right this time. That's what I was thinking. Okay, now, so some people, they will say that King Josiah, right? So Josiah is the king there of Judah, and we're going to have Jeremiah in 627 in the 13th year of Josiah. He's going to begin his ministry. He's going to begin prophesying. And he prophesies from 627 to 586. So we have Nabopolassar is going to be a couple of years after that. So during that reign of Josiah, the Neo-Babylonian Empire is rising. The Assyrian Empire is falling. Now, Assyria and Egypt had been enemies fighting over the Levant, but they now become allies against Babylon. So those types of things happen, right? People that are enemies, like Russia, became an ally against the Germans, right? Things like that in the Second World War. So that's what's happening there. Now, some people have Josiah fighting with Egypt, which doesn't really make any sense to me because he's going to get hit by a stray arrow. So it's pretty clear from the Bible that he's fighting against Egypt. Now, so in 609, why is Josiah fighting against Egypt in this battle? What's going on there? So we had the death of Josiah, and we're going to have Jehoahaz is going to be placed on the throne by Egypt, or maybe not placed. No, I don't think he's placed on the. I'm trying to remember. Jehoiakim's placed on the throne by Egypt. Yeah. So Jehoahaz just becomes king after Josiah dies, and then Egypt, which had this protection racket with Judah, they're going to then come and depose Jehoahaz, take him as prisoner to Egypt. He's going to die in Egypt, and then Jehoiakim is going to be placed on the throne. And so that's going to be Necho who does that. So that's 609. And then we have the details of that. So when we have Jehoiakim become king, Jehoahaz is going to be king for 3 months, and he's going to be deposed prior to his accession year, or prior to his inauguration. So he only has an accession year. So the 31st year of Josiah is the accession year of Jehoahaz and also Jehoiakim, right? That is, Jehoiakim becomes king in still what would have been the 31st year of Josiah. So he has a short accession year. And then in his third year, Daniel's going to be taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar. Now, that's not recorded in the Babylonian Chronicles. So we see Jehoiachin is going to be anointed at 8 years of age. At that time, Nebuchadnezzar, who's the crown prince, he's going to take his army and go to Jerusalem. He's going to pay some tribute. So in 2 Kings 24, it talks about how Jehoiakim, how's it go? So this is what I just put in this diagram, whether it starts to get too messy or not. Let's do this here. So it's in 2 Kings, switch the screen, 2 Kings 24, verse 1. It says, in his days, that is Jehoiakim's days, king of Babylon came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. So we went through this yesterday a little bit, because we had gone through it earlier. Stephen and I had tried to sort this out, and I'd looked at views that other people had, but I agreed with Stephen that it makes more sense. He also adjusted his view a little bit as far as when the 3 years ends. So this is going to be 607 that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up and Jehoiakim became his servant. That makes the most sense as being Daniel chapter 1, verse 1, right? So that's going to be in the third year of Jehoiakim that occurs. It doesn't make sense, I guess, to put it somewhere else because that's when Jehoiakim becomes his servant. Now, in 2 Kings 25, right, you're going to have, it's going to go all the way over. So from in 2 Kings, because that's what we've been studying, 2 Kings. So you're going to have this short section dealing with Jehoiakim. Then you're going to have a really short section dealing with Jehoiachin. And then it's going to cover, I guess it covers him being carried captive and then Zedekiah being put on the throne. So then you have a short section with Zedekiah here in chapter 24. So it's going to cover Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah, all in chapter 24 of 2 Kings. Now, then it's going to deal with the fall and captivity of Judah in 2 Kings 25. So 24 and 25 cover a great deal of ground, right? A lot of that history that we see more detail in the book of Jeremiah. Okay. Now, as far as when we go to 2 Chronicles and we deal with this history, we haven't really looked at this too much. So you're going to have 2 Chronicles is going to deal with Josiah's Passover in 35, Josiah being killed in battle. So that's that battle in 609. And then in chapter 36, so this has, some of the same history that we see in 2 Kings, but from a different perspective. So then when Josiah dies, it says the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. And then Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And the king of Egypt put him down at Jerusalem and condemned the land in 100 talents of silver and at a talent of gold. And the king of Egypt made Eliakim, his brother, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and turned his name to Jehoiakim. And Necho, that's Pharaoh Necho, took Jehoahaz, his brother, and carried him to Egypt. Right? Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. And against him came up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. So again, it's going to give you the same history. So we see this in Daniel chapter 1, which gives us the year being the third year. And then we have in 2 Kings 24, it's going to say that this is going to happen. And then in 3 years, he's going to rebel against him. Okay, so we'll look at that 3 years again. So it's going to give some of the same details. And then it talks about very little about his reign, just basically what happened with him serving the king of Babylon. Doesn't say how long here, right? And then Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. So this one has the 8 years, which commentators say is a typo. We've worked that out so that 8 years old is actually correct. It's just when Jehoiakim, his dad, is besieged at the time in 607, in the fall of 607, that Jehoiachin is 8 years old. So he would have, in a sense, began to reign. But his actual reign, the time he actually reigns in Jerusalem, is 3 months and 10 days. And then it has, and when the year was expired, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon. Now, this is a detail we haven't looked yet, which we should have. So when is Jehoiachin carried to Babylon? Now, we know that based on ABC 5, so I'm going to go there. That's not the right spot. I had the ABC 5 open. There it is. Okay. So this is the Assyrian Babylonian Chronicles, number 5. So this is going to go all the way from 605. So this isn't going to be in the period when Daniel's taken captive. This is going to start. So the one that deals with Nabopolassar and the end of his reign, particularly, is in ABC 4. So this is ABC 5 of these chronicles. So this one starts kind of where the other, in the 21st year of King of Akkad, Nabopolassar stayed in his own land. Nebuchadnezzar, his eldest son, the crown prince, mustered the Babylonian army and took command of his troops and marched to Carchemish, which is on the bank of the Euphrates. So this is not the Battle of Carchemish that occurs in 609. This is the one in 605. So and he crossed the river to go against the Egyptian army which lay in Carchemish, and they fought with each other, and the Egyptian army withdrew before him. He accomplished their defeat and beat them to non-existence, as for the rest of the Egyptian army. So you can see in this battle, the way that the Babylonians describe this is they're actually not even describing Assyria, right? They're coming against Egypt, right? Even though really this is about the fall of Assyria. So Assyria has just become really weak at that time. And the area of Hamath is where the Assyrians have made their capital. So now, so there's probably lots of details that this leaves out, but we can see that this is that whole battle, right, of what happens in 605. Now, during that battle, he's going to get news that his father has died. So Nabopolassar has died on the 8th of Av. Now, the 8th of Av is the 8th day of the 5th month on the Babylonian calendar. They never number their months, but what we would call the 5th month. And that's August 15th, 605. So that has the symbol of the midnight cry. Any significance there that we can see that Nebuchadnezzar begins his accession year on that date when his dad dies? And we know we have August 15th as a symbol from Millerite history. That's the midnight cry date. That's Exeter. We also have it symbolized in the 15th day of the 8th month at the beginning of the dividing of the kingdom, with Jeroboam offering on the idol and offering on the altar in Bethel to the golden calf. So that symbol there, 15th day of the 8th month. So whether this is significant here or not, we haven't put any of this on a line yet. We've mostly been just addressing the chronology. So he went to his destiny. He died. And then in the month Elulu, that's going to be the 6th month, Nebuchadnezzar returns to Babylon. And what they mean there, he returned to Babylon on that day, and on the 1st of Elulu, he's going to sit on the royal throne of Babylon. So that's going to be, from the 8th of the 5th month to the 1st of the 6th month. So we know that his whoever brought him the message went across the desert, the quickest route from Babylon to Carchemish, and then he's going to quickly go back to Babylon after defeating Egypt. So he's going to so exactly when the battle ends, but we just know that he's going to return to Babylon after hearing the news of his father's death. So exactly the dates in which he gets notified, we don't know. Okay. So in the accession year of Nebuchadnezzar, went back again to the Hatti land until the month Sabbatu. So that's going to be during that period of time. So it doesn't say exactly which month that he's going to leave, but basically he's going to be like 3 or 4 months back in the Hatti land, right? And then it says in the month Sabbatu, he took heavy tribute of the Hatti territory to Babylon. And then in the spring, 604, he took the hands of Bel and the son of Bel and celebrated the Akitu festival. So when it says he took the hands of Bel and the son of Bel, that is his inauguration, right? So that occurs on the 1st day of the 1st month, right? That he becomes king. That's not his accession year anymore. He now is officially counting the year of his reign. And then he celebrates the Akitu festival, which happens in the 1st month. So that's in connection. Now there's different, when you read about the Akitu festival. So the Akitu festival is an Assyrian religion celebration. Now Babylon is also going to observe the Akitu festival. So they have this because they have the same religion, even though they're different nations. And then when Persia conquers Babylon, it's also going to celebrate the Akitu festival, even though it's not part. Because what's the religion of Persia? Anybody know? It's a completely different religion. But yet, when they conquer Babylon, they're going to observe it. Dwight, do you know?
I was thinking Zoroastrianism, but I
Yep,
don't really.
yep, that's correct. Zoroastrianism. Yeah. So we don't hear much about Zoroastrianism anymore. I don't know anybody who practices it, but it is quite a bit different. It's not even really related as far as I can see, other than it's a pagan religion. But why would the king of Persia, Cyrus, why would he continue? And we see that with Darius and with Xerxes. Like Xerxes, for instance, when he in Esther, so he's called Ahasuerus in the King James, but when he has that feast for 180 days and then that 7-day feast, he's actually starting that 180 days on the first day of the first month with the Akitu festival. And then he ends it on the 7 days. And the seventh day there, when he wants to have Vashti come in, that's at the end of the fall Akitu festival, right? And so that's going to be the 187th day of the year. So it kind of parallels the Day of Atonement being the 187th day of the year. And also, when Babylon falls, they're going to be keeping the Akitu festival. So in the year when Belshazzar, right there in Daniel chapter 5, we have in the Babylonian Chronicles called, what's the tablet called? It's called the Nabonidus Chronicle. So Nabonidus is the king that's actually the king when Babylon falls. Belshazzar is the second in command, right? So he's the second next to the king. And that's because Nabonidus is actually not really acting as the king. He's more like a priest or a monk. So he's really, really religious. But during that year, they're going to be taking all these gods of the Babylonian Empire and transporting them month by month. They give an account of these gods being brought from the different parts of the Babylonian Empire to the city of Babylon. So in Daniel chapter 5, when they're worshiping the gods of gold and silver and wood and stone, right? And, they're drinking from the cups from the sanctuary, and the writing on the wall happens. That is historically verified in the Nabonidus Chronicle, and it gives the date for when Cyrus's army goes into the city, and that's going to be on the 16th day of the 7th month, and that's going to be October 13th, 593, 539. I said it backwards. 539 BC, right? Which is in the fall to fall year 538. So there's a lot of interesting details when we start looking at what we have that people overlook. That is, I've seen nobody actually pay any attention to the Akitu festival here. People know what it is, scholars know what it is, but they don't pay any attention to it prophetically. They don't notice it in the story of Esther, and they don't seem to pay much attention to it when we have the story of Belshazzar. So I haven't noticed anybody who of scholarly work who pays attention to any of this kind of detail. But I think it's pretty interesting details, right? Now, if Daniel's taken captive in the fall of 607, and he's going to have this test, right? So let's move from there to Daniel. So in Daniel chapter 1, verse 5, it says that all these, it's going to talk about them taking these children, right? And they're going to teach them in verse 4, right? And it says, the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof, they might stand before the king. So when we're dealing with this 3 years, we notice that there is this 3 years also mentioned in 2 Kings 24. So it seems to be the same period of 3 years. And since it's going to be in 604 that, so after the inauguration, that he's going, and I should have looked at that first, but it says in the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, in the month Semanu, that is in the 3rd month, he mustered his army and went to the Hatti territory, and he marched about unopposed in the Hatti territory until the month Kislev, until the 9th month. And all the kings of the Hatti land came before him and received their heavy, and he received their heavy tribute, right? So what we're saying is in that year 604, after Daniel has been made, after he passed his test, then that's when the rebellion of Jehoiakim occurs. And so that means during that time, even though it doesn't particularly mention Judah, they're not going to mention Judah until 597 when Jehoiachin is taken captive. But we would say that this would be at the end of that 3 years. So that 3 years. So what I'm saying is that Daniel is going to be tested, and it makes sense that he's tested during the Akitu festival. Now, it could be that, his test just comes later in the fall, because we know that in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar, we know that Daniel is one of the Chaldeans, right? He's one of the, this group of astrologers and magicians and sorcerers and Chaldeans, right? So he's already passed that test. He's part of these advisors to the king, right? So when Nebuchadnezzar has his dream in the 2nd year of his reign, we know that Daniel's already been elevated into that position, right? Now he's not going to be it's going to be because of interpreting the dream that he's going to be elevated further. But at this point, he's just one of these Chaldeans, right? One of these advisors of the king. So that 3 years fits. So we have on the chart that I made, I put this in. And if anybody has questions, you can always ask. I mean, I'm always trying to respond to what I think you guys might need to, that you might be having problems with. But here, you can see I put this yellow section. So this is the 3 years of Daniel 1:5 and 2 Kings 24:1. I'm going to make this still smaller. I know it's pretty small already. Just want that so I can't get that in anywhere. Okay, so that's going to begin when Jehoiachin is anointed. That's when Daniel 1, verse 1. So we don't have that in there. Maybe I should put that in here. I don't know. I start putting too many things in the chart. It just gets really, really messy. But that covers up that period. So we have that period of the 3 years. So I put it to the spring of 604, from the fall of 607 to the spring of 604. It's not 3 complete years, but we often know that they do this inclusive count. So 3 years, there's the 3 years of the siege of Samaria. It's really 2 years, right? But it's parts of 3 years. And so I would say that this makes sense. It wouldn't make sense to move it over to 604, to 603 from 604. But we have to have it somewhere in the first year of Nebuchadnezzar. So I suggest right at the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's first year. And that would make sense logically in that Nebuchadnezzar had taken Daniel captive, trained these young men, right? And now he's going to elevate them, they get their graduation ceremony in connection with his inauguration. And we see something similar to that when Jehoiachin is released from prison after 36 years, when evil Merodach comes to the throne after the death of Nebuchadnezzar. So when Nebuchadnezzar dies in 680, and it's probably 682, or pardon me, am I doing that right? 582. 5, I'm doing it backwards. 562. There we go. Which is beyond, right here. So this was Jeremiah 52:31. So that's going to be March 31st, 561. That Jehoiachin is released from prison, right, on December 25th. Well, it's not December 25th, but the 25th day of the 12th month. And so the suggestion is that Nebuchadnezzar dies, and this is the accession year of Jehoiachin, but he's going to be released from prison in connection with the inauguration of Evil Merodach, right? So we can see that there with these inaugurations, that these are special events, and we can see this. We don't see much in our societies today, but ceremonies were definitely, maybe Americans do a bit more ceremony than Canadians do, but there used to be a lot more ceremony, and especially in the ancient empires. And why would they do so much ceremony? What was the purpose of ceremony? What is it in general, not just then? Anyone?
Well, ceremony isn't it more just a form rather than a true understanding of what is to be done? And maybe I'm not asking the question well.
Well, so, but for these kings, they're going to have these ceremonies,
right?
And they're going to focus. Like when we look at something like in Rome, what do they call them? The triumphs,
right?
Yeah. So we can see, especially in pagan culture, it's a substitute for God, right? Does that make sense?
I would agree.
Yeah. So it's a counterfeit of God's glory. So it's man's glory. And so we can see why when they have an inauguration or something like that, we see that in the United States, it's a lot bigger deal in the United States, when somebody becomes a president than anything that we have in Canada. So there is this tradition or whatever of a ceremony that occurs within different cultures. And so definitely back then we could see why Daniel would be taken, have his test in connection with the inauguration. Just like when Trump was inaugurated, he had, this big inauguration ceremony, all these different people brought out for different reasons. And I would look at that as basically a parallel to what happened with Daniel and his friends when they're being tested. It would make sense that they do this in a ceremonial way with some big event. And especially his inauguration, that would make sense, right? So that's my argument for it. Now, the other thing that happens with this, and of course with Jehoiachin being released from prison, again, that would be something Evil Merodach does as part of a ceremony, showing it, maybe his mercy. I don't know what particular things, he's trying to show. But here with Daniel and his friends being tested at the end of these 3 years, it makes sense that it's in 604. But we also have this other problem. Where do most people put the Babylonian captivity commencing? So Daniel, when do they have Daniel being taken captive? So they're going to have Daniel taken captive, not in 607. So traditionally people had 606 because the third year of Jehoiakim is mostly 606. Why does it do that? Okay. Right. You can see it's from the fall of 607 to the fall of 606. So just, the pioneers, they would say that's when Daniel's taken captive, 606, and the captivity goes from 606 to 536. That'd be the 70 years, right? That's just, when you don't have the details, then that's how you would look at, it would just be the logical thing. You don't have enough information. You don't have the Babylonian Chronicles, right? We don't have these specific dates lined up. Like even the idea of 536, most of the time people don't look at the detail, because in 536 we know we're going to have Cyrus's decree. Now, so Cyrus, when he succeeds to the throne, is in the fall of 537. Ellen White says it's within about 2 years of the fall of Babylon. Now, what some people will do, because we have on the 1843 charts, it says 538. And so some people just say, well, Ellen White is just using that chronology that the pioneers had. And so she's being sort of specifically unspecific when she says, within about 2 years. So she just believes 538. That's what people think. And then they're going to mark 536 when Cyrus's decree is issued in the spring as when he comes to the throne. But we know that it's when he succeeds to the throne that Ellen White says that marks the completion of the 70 years from when the first captives were carried away to Babylon. And we know the first captives are Daniel and his friends. So it would be hard to say, like you could maybe argue that Daniel and his friends were taken in 606, and then Cyrus came to the throne in the spring of 606. But then that would mean that Ellen White is wrong within about 2 years of the fall of Babylon, because Babylon doesn't fall in 538. It falls in 539. Now, in the fall of 539, right, specifically October 13th, 16th day of the 7th month. But hers aligns with history in a way that would not have been understood in her time. That is, they started finding all this archaeology, but that information hadn't filtered down yet generally to the average person. Even A.T. Jones, when he writes about the fall of Babylon and Daniel chapter 5, when does anybody know what he does with Daniel chapter 5? When does he have that, Daniel 5, we all know Daniel 5, the writing on the wall. So he's going to use the Nabonidus Chronicle, that same chronicle that says that Babylon is going to fall in 536, or pardon me, 539, right? Does anybody know what he does with that? It's kind of an interesting history, because I had discussions with people in this movement over this, because let me see here. I could maybe show, because this is an interesting detail. Okay, so that's not there. So let me think if I can find this quickly. I know it's not maybe good to try to look for things that I don't know where they are quickly, but I'm pretty sure it's just in Jones' writings. So if I just search Jones.
Would you be looking in his book, Great Empires of Prophecy?
I don't know. I just know it's one of his books. I'm pretty sure. So let me see. So search. I'm just going to look for 508 BC, or 538 BC, pardon me. Okay, yeah. So he does it in the Advent Review and Sabbath Herald articles as well. Okay, so this is interesting. Authenticity of the scriptures concluded. Okay, so I'll share this screen. Okay, he's got some stuff here dealing with the translation of the Old Testament into Greek. Okay, it says here, first we'll notice the book of Daniel, and as an introduction, offer a few lines from an editorial in the New York Independent. A few years ago, the critics, with one voice, refused to see anything in it, the book of Daniel, more than an apocalyptic composition on the date of Antiochus Epiphanes. Eichhorn, Berthold, Gesenius, Devant, all these different guys, with the more moderate as well as the rationalistic critics, agreed in its late date, some being so precise as to fix it as 167 BC. So some people believe that the book of Daniel was written in 167 BC. And they say, there never was any Belshazzar, they exclaimed, and we could bring nothing to corroborate our written record. The replies made to them were feeble and unsatisfactory, but the monuments of the kings of Babylon began to be read a few years ago. So this is in 1882, May 9th, 1882, that this article is written. And so you can see, it's going to be in the 1800s that they're going to start finding these monuments and documents and so forth. The critics would assert with a great deal of assurance that there never was any Belshazzar, because Barosius and Herodotus, the only authorities of any value on the subject, both gave a list of Babylonian kings in neither of which was any Belshazzar named. Therefore, as the historians failed to mention him, there never was any such king. But the Babylonian inscriptions make it plain and exactly confirm the biblical account. They declare that Nabu-Nahid, that is Nabonidus, with an army took the field against Cyrus and left Belshazzar, his eldest son, in command of the city of Nabu-Nabid, or in the command of the city. Nabu-Nabid, Nabonidus, being defeated by Cyrus, was compelled to take refuge in Borsippa, and Cyrus went on against Babylon and Belshazzar, and the city was taken with Belshazzar, as recorded in Daniel 5. And this condition of affairs in Babylon is the only one that will agree with the record in Daniel. Daniel was certainly made prime minister in the kingdom, the chain of gold being the insignia of that office. Yet for all this, his being prime minister, he is spoken of as the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel 5:7, 16, and 20. How can this be? Thus Nabonidus, the first ruler, Belshazzar, his son, the second ruler, and Daniel, prime minister, yet the third ruler. And in no other possible way can the records of Daniel be met, for his office was really the second in the kingdom. But how fully this illustrates the perfect accuracy of the scriptures. Here's an important point in the history of Babylon, wholly passed over by the historians. Yet Daniel records it exactly as it is, and after more than 2,000 years, the inscriptions of the king of Babylon declare that he is correct. This also fixes the date of the book of Daniel to a time that has been claimed for it, because there's no other time in the world's history when these points in Daniel could have been written. For shortly after Babylon fell into decay, and these inscriptions were buried out of sight, and the historians made no mention of any of them, consequently they could never have been learned afterward. Therefore, they were learned in Babylon at the time when they transpired. And thus the claims of the book of Daniel are correctly placed and absolutely fixed at the date 538 BC, right? So they're going to have 538 BC as the fall of Babylon. And let me see here. Then he's going to go into Ezekiel. Okay. So you can see he's going to have 538. And I'm just looking here at this. This is Present Truth article. So again, he's going to have 538 for Darius the Mede. And that's going to basically be the same thing. Yeah, so they got 625. That's going to be, right, remember 625 is when Nabopolassar becomes king. And then they have the fall of Babylon, 538. So this is just Seven Great Monarchies, 4th chapter, right? So this is, so when you look at the history books that they had, they all had 538. Now, no, so he doesn't Nabonidus. He doesn't mention Nabonidus specifically, at least not here. Okay, and might be in this section, but I don't see it. Anyway, what's going to happen? I'll explain it. Oh, here he has it. Nabonidus. Nabonidus. So he spells it differently. Okay, this is the part I wanted. Okay, the handwriting on the wall, signs of the times. Okay, again, the scene of our lesson is laid in Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of Chaldee's excellency. Still she sits, the lady of kingdoms, comforting herself with the thought, I shall be a lady forever. I shall not sit a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But just then it was that she should no more be called the lady of kingdoms. And just then it was that they should come upon her that which had been spoken of her. These two things shall come upon thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. Right? Okay, so the events noted in this lesson occurred about 44 years after those of the lesson for last week. The great King Nebuchadnezzar had been dead about 23 years, and with him had departed the greatness and real glory of the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar himself had finally been brought to a full acknowledgement of the true God, and had published a decree to that effect to all the nations of his dominion. But it seems to have had no discernible impression on any that followed him in the kingdom, and iniquity culminated in his grandson Belshazzar, the subject of the present lesson. Nebuchadnezzar was succeeded by his son Evil-Merodach, which is not actually his son, but his son-in-law. But his lusts and other wickedness made him so intolerable that at length even his own relations conspired against him and put him to death. After his having reigned 2 years, and Nabopolassar, his brother-in-law, reigned in his stead. Nabopolassar reigned nearly 4 years and was succeeded by merely in name by Nabopolassar, a mere boy, who was suffered to remain only a few months when Nabonidus, the father of Belshazzar, took the throne in BC 555 and held it till the end of the empire in BC 538. Nabonidus, he has, sometime we know not just how long, before the ruin of the kingdom, had associated his son Belshazzar with him in rule of the kingdom. In the year 539 BC, Cyrus, at the head of a heavy army of Medes and Persians, left Ecbatana in an expedition against Babylon. In the spring of 538, he crossed the Tigris and came within sight of Babylon. So he has this wrong, right? And that's because they don't, at that time, they didn't have all of these details. And came within sight of Babylon itself before he met any opposition. Nabonidus had drawn out an army to meet the invader in a short distance from the city, and the Babylonian forces were defeated. And King Nabonidus took refuge in Borsippa and about 6 miles from Babylon. Cyrus shut him up and left enough soldiers to hold him, and he with the main army laid siege to the glorious capital. The defeat of Nabonidus and his flight to Borsippa left the young Belshazzar the sole direction of affairs in Babylon. Okay, now it's going to deal with here. So he's going to talk about what happens there. So Belshazzar the king made a great feast of the thousands of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Then he called the sacred vessels of Jehovah, which his grandfather had brought from the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines drank in them. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, wrote again over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. Right? So we have this account in the Bible. But none of these could tell him a word. Then his mother came in and told him of Daniel's ability to interpret secrets. Daniel was immediately sent for, and he came and told the king the writing and the meaning of it. Right? So we're all familiar with this story. So it doesn't have the detail that I'm still looking for. Let me see if I can find it this way. Yeah, this might be it. I know this is, it's a good review, all of these things. I'm just trying to see if I can find this quote. I might just have to explain it. No, it's not here. Anyway, what he does, when the Nabonidus Chronicle was discovered, so it's going to be written in cuneiform. It's a cuneiform tablet. And that's why it survived. Things written on papyrus and things like that, vellum, they're not going to survive long periods of time very easily. We do have the Elephantine papyri that's on papyrus, which survived partially. But anyway, we have these written in cuneiform, which is just clay tablets where you take a stick and you use this alphabet that you can just use a stick to kind of poke holes in the clay to write letters. But anyway, so when this was transcribed, that is, a person is going to look at the text, because they didn't have cameras back then, or they didn't take photos of them. Somebody would look at it and transcribe it, and then the transcription would be sent to scholars to translate, right? Now, when this Nabonidus Chronicle, and see, he calls it a different thing. I can't remember what he calls the document. That's why I can't find it. But it actually says that instead of the 16th day of Tishritu, it has instead the month Tammuz, right? So it has the fall of Babylon in the 4th month in the transcription. And so that is what A.T. Jones is going to use, that early transcription of the document. And it was just an error that was made. And one of the things about the document the Nabonidus Chronicle, is it goes month by month through all of these gods being brought. So in Daniel chapter 5, on October 13th, right, we're going to have the 16th day of the 7th month, because that's actually what it says in the document, the original tablet. And of course, that's only logical because they're going to give you a month by month account of what happens that year. And so it made no sense that it was the 4th month, Tammuz, that the writing on the wall occurs. But you can see in his chronology, if Babylon fell in the 5th month, that would not fit with the history that we have, right? So if you had it fall 2 months earlier, it would fit with this chronology that he has. So he has about, what happens in 539, and they make a bunch of assumptions based upon the little information they have. And so they have Babylon fall in the summer of 538. Now, when I had presented this whole thing dealing with 539, there was many people in the movement who got upset because it says 538 on the chart, and they took that as, since that, Ellen White says the figures are as they God wanted them, and his hand held a mistake over in some of the figures, but all the other figures must be correct. So they would argue that you can't have 539 for the fall of Babylon. It has to be 538, and it has to be in the summer. And he's going to connect this with these, and that's why I typed in Bacchus here, this back in wine idea. So he taught that this was some Roman festival that was being celebrated. So A.T. Jones did not understand the Akitu festival and what has actually happened. And if he had read all of the Nabonidus Chronicle, where it talks about all these gods of gold and silver and wood and stone. So the question is, or the point is, there's a number of points, but one is, when they're drinking out of those goblets from the sanctuary in Jerusalem, that they're doing this as part of their celebration of these various gods. So these are gods that they have conquered. That is, Marduk, their god, has conquered all of these other gods. So they bring all of these gods from these different places. So can you see why they have these golden cups from the sanctuary? That's part of their celebration of conquering all of these different gods. Any thoughts on that? I know that's a long explanation. I wish I had the name of this document, what they called it. But, okay, so they're worshiping the gods of, gold, silver, wood, stone, and they drank wine and praised the gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone, right? So they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. So they have these golden vessels, and they have these gods that they have conquered, but they're also praising those gods, right? So it's a very strange sort of religion where you adopt the gods that you conquered. So they're worshiping all of these gods, which are subject to their God. Okay. So when we start looking at this this chronology, when we recognize that this is in connection with the Akitu festival, all of these little pieces fall into place. I know, there's still lots of other little pieces, but we can see that there's a picture that starts to form once we deal with this chronology in its fine details. And that's the mistake to say it's a mistake, it's people can't see what they can't see if they don't have the details, if they haven't worked through them. And the thing is, they couldn't have worked through them. A.T. Jones could not have the knowledge we have. Yeah, Dwight?
No, I'm looking at some things on ABC 7.
Okay. Yeah. I have the document here too. So what are you seeing in ABC 7?
No, I'm reading it to try to get my head around what we're talking about.
Okay. So let me see here, because I have it all lined out and annotated. Let me see if I can find it.
So in this situation, Nabonidus would have been away from Babylon for an extended period of time.
Yeah. So Nabonidus is not in the city of Babylon. He's some kind of priest or monk in, worshiping God Marduk. So he's kind of like in a monastery of some sort. So really, Belshazzar's operating as king, but he's not officially the king, right? Like he's not the number one in charge, even though he's, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. So why particularly that is, nobody really knows. So let me see here. Let me find this quickly. Okay. I'll show you this document here. Okay, so the Nabonidus Chronicle. The Nabonidus Chronicle contains a contemporary account of the fall of Babylon. When we come to the 17th year of Nabonidus, there's an account of the procession of the gods being brought to Babylon for the fall Akitu festival. This gives us the context for the feast of Belshazzar, where they praise the gods of gold, of silver, of brass, of wood, and of stone, of iron, of wood, and stone. So it goes on. It says, the 17th year, Nabu came from Borsippa for the procession of Bel. Bel came out. In the month Tebetu of the previous year, the king entered Eterkalama. In the temple, he made libation of wine. Bel came out. They performed the spring Akitu festival as at normal times in the month, and they have here Av, the gods of Marad, Zababa, and the gods of Kish, Ninlil, and the gods of whatever that place is, entered Babylon. Until the end of the month Elulu, the gods of Akkad from everywhere were entering Babylon. The gods of Borsippa, Cutha, and Sippar did not enter Babylon. What follows next is a plethora on chronological information that is pertinent to the establishing when the fall of Babylon occurred. Also, several people are introduced, some of whom we know well, and others that there are a variety of opinions as to who they are. In the month Tashritu, so this is the 7th month, right? And I have a footnote here. Due to a copyist error in the British Museum, early editions, it's called the Annalistic Tablet of Cyrus, as it was then known, had the month Tammuz, the 4th month, instead of Tashritu, the 7th month. Of course, this made no sense to those trying to understand the chronology of the text, in that the previous month mentioned is Elulu, the 6th month, right? So I would have to look up this Annalistic Tablet. That's the word I was looking for. I should have thought of looking here. So if I just going to see, no, they don't. They don't. He doesn't use he spells it differently. So I'd have to find it in Jones' writings. Okay. Anyway, this thing called the Annalistic Tablet, that's the thing that Jones was using. So if we go back here then, Cyrus did battle at Opis on the banks of the Tigris against the army of Akkad. People of Akkad retreated, right? So that's the Babylonians. He carried off the plunder and slaughtered the people. On the 14th day, Sippar was captured without a battle. Nabonidus fled. So we know that he was Nabonidus was there because of the temple there, right? On the 16th day, Ugbaru, governor of Gutium, and the army of Cyrus, without battle, they entered Babylon. So that's going to be the governor of Gutium and the army of Cyrus. Now, Cyrus himself does not personally enter Babylon on the 16th day, right? Afterwards, Nabonidus retreated. He was captured in Babylon until the end of the month. So later on, he's going to be captured in Babylon, right? Not on the 16th day, but that's going to be the fall of Babylon. So that 16th day of the 7th month of Tishritu, that is when the army enters Babylon. So Sippar is going to be captured on the 14th, and then on the 16th day, they enter Babylon. And then Cyrus is going to later enter Babylon. So I think it's here after, let me see, on the 3rd day of the month, Ashurama, Cyrus entered Babylon. So Cyrus is not going to enter into Babylon until the month Ashrama, on the third month Ashrama. So that month is the 8th month. So that's going to be the month after Tishritu. So he's going to be on the third day of the month. So that's going to be the 8th month, right? And then from the month Kislevu, that's the 9th month, to the month Adaru, the gods of Akkad, which Nabonidus had brought to Babylon, returned to their places. On the night of the 11th month, Arashama Agrigu died, whoever that is. In the month Adarau, the king's wife died. So it's going to tell you these different things that happen. So you can see logically that has to be the 7th month, not the 5th month, or the 4th month, I mean, not Tammuz. So Jones ends up tying this month Tammuz, with some kind of wine festival. But we can see that this is actually the Akitu festival. Now, again, other people who study these things, they interpret the documents differently because they start with this different set of assumptions. And that is, when you have a lens that you're looking through, that is your assumptions. One thing is you don't notice things that because they're not connected in your mind to anything. So, we can notice these details because one is we believe the Bible. We also have, prophecy and spirit of prophecy. So we have these, we can see significance where other people can't. And so that to me is, the interesting thing about this whole story is nobody else puts this together that I know of to try to understand what's happening. They put parts of it together here and there, but they don't put this whole picture of all of this chronology and the significance of the Akitu festival. So I've never seen anybody, notice these things. Now, of course, Jones is going to connect this to Daniel chapter 5, but he's not going to connect it to the Akitu festival because he's going to have it in the 4th month, which makes no sense, right? Based on this document, right? So, yeah. Now, how they would confuse the name of the month, Tishritu and Tammuz. One is they both start with the same letter. Now, of course, we're looking at them here in, English transliterations through other languages. But when you look at the cuneiform, it's actually, they do look similar. But for some reason, the person just who transcribed, the tablet, who wrote it out on paper, and then whoever translated that had it as the month Tammuz, right? But it didn't make any sense. Now, so that's ABC 7, column 3, lines 12 to 28. That we quoted from there. Yeah. Now I just have another footnote here. Though the Nabonidus Chronicle is considered a propaganda piece written by Cyrus after the death of Darius the Mede, it is still preserving important details. It downplays the role of Belshazzar, not mentioning him by name, and plays up other details. Now, so the reason they do that, why they say it's a propaganda piece, is so Cyrus, and this goes back to an earlier question, dealing with why it's written in this way. So what you want to show the people, what the Persians wanted to show the people that they conquered, is that they respected their gods, right? So the Persians are Zoroastrians. They don't believe in these gods, but Cyrus is going to show respect to those gods. Zoroastrianism is, and if we go back, and I don't know if we can make a direct connection, but there is in Persia. So Persia, which is now Iran, and that area when we go to like Arabia, which is south there, and so forth, and a little bit, of Iran, it's a little bit west. But in that area, we have all of these pagan gods. Now, when Islam arises, they're going to be a monotheistic religion, but there's still this characteristic of Islam where they incorporate other religions into their religion, right? So that it's sort of a synchronistic characteristic. So, for instance, if you talk to a Muslim, do they, think Jesus is a false god? For instance, they have some respect toward Jesus. He was a prophet, right? And so this type of thinking, I think, is ingrained in these cultures, where even if they're monotheistic, they incorporate, and we see this, of course, with Rome as well. Rome is the epitome of syncretism, where they adopt and adapt the different various religious practices and mingle them with Christianity of sorts, right? So to me, it's a rather interesting detail that you have these Zoroastrians practicing the Akitu festival and showing this respect towards these other religions that doesn't really make sense, from, if you believe that your religion is true, why would you acknowledge another religion? But this was very, very, very common. So even, Xerxes is going to celebrate the Akitu festival, which doesn't seem to make much sense if he's a Zoroastrian, but he does, right? And Cyrus observes it, or at least he shows respect that it's being observed by Babylon, right? So he has to, in this, so that's the propaganda part of it. The propaganda is when Babylon falls, is we were really respectful to your gods, right? We did this all very respectfully, even though we ended up with Belshazzar practicing the Akitu festival, where we could read more of it where they show this. Let me see, I could read back a bit of this. Yeah, so if we read this section here, because remember, the whole Chronicle, all about the gods being brought to Babylon. That's part of this document, right? Then they get to Teshritu. So he's going to come, and then it says, let me see where I picked this up here. Okay, afterwards, Nabonidus retreated. He was captured in Babylon. Until the end of the month, the shield-bearing troops from Gutium surrounded the gates of Esagil. But interruption of rites in Esagil or the other temples, there was not. We didn't interrupt any of the rites, right? The ceremonies being in those temples. And there was, and no date for a performance was missed. On the third month of Arishamna, Cyrus entered Babylon. The Haru vessels were filled before him. There was peace in the city while Cyrus, his greeting to Babylon in its entirety, spoke. Gabaru, his district officer, appointed the district officers in Babylon. From the month of Kislevu to the month of Adaru, the gods of Akkad, which Nabonidus had brought to Babylon, returned to their places, right? On the night of the 11th month, right, Ugbaru died. In the month Adaru, the king's wife died. From the 27th of the month Adaru, in the 3rd of the month Nisanu, there was an official mourning period in Akkad. All of the people bared their heads. On the 4th day, when Cambyses, son of Cyrus, went to this place, which I can't, Agedric Alama Suma Samu, the official of Nabu, who, when he came because of the Elamite dress, the hand of Nabu spears and quivers from the crown prince to his work. Anyway, you can see they're showing all of this, and Nabu and Esagil before Bel and the son of Bel. So they're mentioning these different gods. They're showing respect towards them, even though Cyrus is a Zoroastrian, right? So that's kind of the point there. So anyway, we went in a little bit different direction than I want. I want to do more of a summary of everything. But we can see the importance of these details, that they give us light on understanding what's happening in the Bible. They support it, but the thing is, they give us not just support, but insight into the story that would generally be hid if we didn't do this type of work. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was looking up the Aristotle tablets, and it brought up that it was Cyrus the Great. Was he a Mede or a Persian?
He's a Persian, right? His Darius, his uncle, was a Mede.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now, of course, that's exactly how that relation happens. I can't remember all the details, but they're related. So the Medes and the Persians obviously
Okay.
are different nations that united
Now-
together with their Zoroastrian religion. Yeah.
I was just getting Cyrus mixed up with Darius. That's my fault.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've had here this morning, and we ask for your continued presence as we go throughout this day, that we can think about these things, that we can be listening to your voice, and that we can respond in obedience. We pray for your angels' care and protection for each one. We ask that we can come again on Sunday to study these things, and we pray for the study tomorrow night and on Sabbath. And we ask that you can help us to prepare for those, Dwight and I, and for others in their personal study. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.